Hi everyone, welcome to our DAT IQ Weekly Market Update. This is our update for August 6th, episode 303. I'm Dean Croak, Market Analyst here at DAT Freight and Analytics, along with co-host Chad Kennedy and special guest Erica Voss. Chad, you've got some flooding with Hurricane Debbie bearing down on Florida right now.
Yeah, so I'm on the Gulf Coast of Florida, and we've got this hurricane that's hitting the Big Bend right now, expected to stall out. So I think we're at a Cat 1 as it's making landfall and expected to stall out over northern Florida and southern Georgia for a few days. So it's going to be a wet week coming up. And yeah, we'll see what this does to the trucking market, if it creates a little bit of demand and puts a little bit of traffic back over the next several days.
Where's the Big Bend area for those that are not familiar with the East Coast?
It is otherwise known as the armpit, but we prefer to call it Big Bend. So that's just east of Tallahassee, as the coast bends around down in southern Florida. Yeah.
Good. All right. Okay. Erica, welcome to the show. First time guest. Glad to have you.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much. It's great to be here. I'm excited to talk with you all.
Yeah, we had a guest on last week, Scott Connell from Travelers Insurance. He's sort of one of our industry experts on fraud. For years, I talked to him about the physical fraud, cargo theft of trailers and truck stops, but it's changed. The landscape has changed. Tell us a little bit about what you do at DAT and your background.
Yeah, so for DAT, I'm the Chief Information Security Officer. So if you think about the role, each company essentially has some head of security, whether it's a physical security, whether it's cybersecurity, a Chief Information Security Officer. You could blend both physical and cyber underneath that person. That's the role that I have within DAT. And what's really great about it is I do look at all the things from that physical security, which is actually where I started in from a career perspective, to today's world, which is all around the cyber threats and attack landscape. One of the things that I think is actually really interesting, especially speaking about Travelers Insurance, is people talk a lot to me about cyber insurance. Should I have it? Should I not have it? And I think a lot of what I try to advise people on is you've got to look at your business model. You've got to look at your, business operations. I wish more people would go out and invest in a head of security or a head of, cybersecurity or a CISO in some level, because the threats and the attacks are only getting worse. Fraud being a great example, like you talked about there, Dean. The different types of fraudsters that exist today. I mean, it's not just about, your seal being broken on the back of your truck. It's now about what do you do about the 18 different ways you can actually hack a truck, an 18-wheeler. I call it 18 different ways to hack the 18-wheeler. And then you have the additional risk, which is putting the driver now in the seat. So then you also have to worry about the driver and, what's being sent via email, what's being sent via text message. Do they understand, what multi-factor authentication is, things like that. And that's very hard when you just literally want to pick up your trailer and you just want to deliver it from point A to point B and then be able to sit down and have dinner with your family at the end of the night. For myself, I mean, I've been in security for, 27 years now, almost, it feels like whatever is a long time. But like I said, started in physical security, ended up today here in cybersecurity, do a ton around fraud, suspicious activity, attack landscape stuff for DAT specifically. Also just very customer obsessed when I think about what we're doing for our customers to make it better for them. And then, claim to fame. I mean, I finished my doctorate last year in cybersecurity. So anything around security really is my passion. I'll talk to you about, how you can get your account to be more secure. We could talk about the different types of fraudsters. I'm happy to, I always tell people I'm always happy to get in a truck and talk to you about what are the risks around some of the trucks and things like that. But yeah, all the good things.
Exciting. A lot has changed. My brush with security was someone shot my steer tires out with a shotgun in 1987 when they pulled alongside me. It didn't end well for those cargo thieves.
Great.
Because I saw them coming, but that was the MO back then, was to physically attack the truck. Not through cyber means. So luckily I had a friend of mine on the loading dock give me a heads up that they were coming.
Which is, I mean, think about that, just like you're saying, from a pure risk perspective. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, that's what you have to deal with, is someone basically just, someone literally just wants to take take your cargo from you. Yeah.
Well, Erica, it was $1 million worth of VCR recorders back in the day.
Well,
they were big things. So it's showing my age a little bit there. Anyway, look forward to bringing you back towards the end of the show. And Chad, hope you stay with us. Hope your internet connectivity lasts. For those new to the show, we're here at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific every week talking about freight trends in the market. We're starting off with a couple of trends we're watching before we dive a little bit deeper into the data. End of month shipping was in the data last week, higher volume, tightened capacity in the spot market, especially in reefer and flatbed. We're seeing some bottoming out of spot rates, continuing a little bit of upward movement in a couple of the sectors. I think there's some really big news going to emerge this week after the jobs numbers last week. Bob Teeter in the Wall Street Journal wrote a great article last week about manufacturing slowing down. We've been writing for the last 3 or 4 weeks in flatbed in our market update about the nearshoring of farm machinery manufacturers to Mexico. It's obviously going to take a hit, or carriers in the specialized area are going to take a hit, with companies like John Deere, Case New Holland, AGCO all laying off staff in the last few months. On-farm income's expected to drop. So I think we're going to see a little bit of a hit there in manufacturing in the machinery market in particular, but in an interesting way, and this is aligned to what Eric is talking about, we're seeing a boost in demand for specialized freight for things like cooling centers used in artificial intelligence in specialized buildings that are being built around the country. ISM manufacturing PMI came out last week, down again. Demand was weak, dropped further into contraction. Not a good sign. New orders index down almost 2 percentage points compared to June. Mark Rourke had a really good, interesting comment on the recent earnings call for Schneider National. His comments pretty much aligned with the soft market that major truckload carriers are seeing. He's quoted as saying there's a prolonged freight market that's weak and overcapacity is the root causes of their recent struggles. However, he said that continued progress towards market equilibrium is evidenced by moderate seasonality and a tightening spot market. Chad's going to talk a little bit about Hurricane Debbie, or we did a little bit earlier. That'll put an impact on the freight market for sure this week in the southeast. That's a big flatbed market. And in this week's market update that'll be published this evening, we're talking about some really interesting gains Daimler have made with hydrogen-powered fuel cell trucks. Fascinating, resulted in an astounding 600-mile range at 80,000 pounds. Now, they did this in Germany, but it's a really interesting milestone to be able to make, which kind of fits the daily range required for long-distance trucking. We're also talking about some of the challenges women in trucking face. The latest news on the Restaurant Performance Index. It's an index that gives us a little bit of an insight in demand for reefer carriers based on what restaurateurs are seeing, and the ongoing demand for flatbed carriers that is waning in the Texas flatbed market. All right, let's dive into some of the load-to-truck ratio data we're seeing in dry van. Typical end-of-month volume. Volumes are up about 5% last week, still about 8% lower compared to last year. Load-to-truck ratio up about 16% to 4.57. And in refrigerated, load posts were fairly flat last week, about 21% lower than last year. That maps to what we're seeing from the USDA truckload produce volumes. Last week were about 2% lower, sitting about 9% lower in California. California produces about 40% of our truckloads of produce at this time of the year. The refrigerated load-to-truck ratio up about 14% to 7.12. And in flatbed, load post volumes were down last week, but about 2% higher than last year. Load-to-truck ratio up slightly to 11.18. Interestingly, almost identical to where it was in 2019 at that number. Having a look at our year-over-year look at spot rates, they were flat last week in dry van, averaging $1.64. Remember, folks, these are line haul rates excluding fuel. They're about a penny per mile higher than last year, as you can see on the chart there with the black line last year. On our top 50 lanes, based on the volume of loads moved, rates were down 2 cents a mile last week on the top 50, averaging 202. That's about 38 cents a mile higher than the national average of $1.64. Dry van rates ended July barely above positive year over year after being negative for 27 months, but they are showing signs of staying positive year over year. In the refrigerated market, the market gained some of the prior week's 5 cent per mile loss. Last week, they were up 2 cents a mile, sitting just under $2 a mile at $1.97, identical to last year and about 1 cent per mile lower than the 3-month trailing average. And lastly, in flatbed, the volume of loads moved and loads posted were down last week by 1% and 8% respectively. Capacity did tighten though. Line haul rates were up 2 cents a mile, starting to see some of the impact of the exodus of capacity in that market also. Flatbed rates are about 2 cents a mile higher than last year, and about 10 cents per mile higher than 2019. Let's have a quick look at our forecasts out to 35 days. For those new to the show, the blue line is the rolling 7-day weighted average of historical loads over 550 miles. They exclude fuel, so they're line haul only. Green is ratecast. Short term is the red model. It more heavily weights data seen more recently, whereas the ratecast model looks at more seasonal data. And the yellow and grey are blends of the two. As you can see there with dry van, we've got a big divergence in rate forecast this week. The red short term is freaking out a little bit based on some of the more recent data it's seeing. I don't think there's cause for alarm just yet. We need to see what data comes out this week. But after dry van spot rates being flat for several weeks, I don't think the short-term or rate cast are realistic this week, given all of the uncertainty about the economy. I don't see rates going up or down by the amount they're forecasting. Ratecast has got rates up 3 cents a mile out to this first week of September and down about 6 cents a mile in the short-term model. Again, I think rates are going to stay fairly flat for the short term, maybe with a little bit of upward inflection, making the yellow line probably the best one to go from. The reefer market, and I'll bring Chad in here. We're starting to see some model agreement here. It's reflecting a tightening of capacity against fairly sluggish demand in the refrigerated market. And as you'll see with the next slide, flatbed is also doing the same thing. Chad, what are your thoughts on what we're seeing in the reefer market?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll show you in a couple of slides here on the shipper side. What we're seeing is reduced new contract rates. So we're still seeing some depression in the contract market, but we are seeing the tightening of the spot rates. So you'll see that spot premium ratio going up while contract rates are coming down. So we are seeing some tightening, but contract rates are still being reduced through some RFP activity. Yep. So taking it from the top here, starting with dry van, with the slide that you see here, the yellow trend here, spot premium ratio. I added some text here to the bottom of these slides to help with understanding. So this is going back to 2017. The spot premium ratio is the premium for spot rates compared to contract rates. So everything that I cover here in this section is from a shipper's perspective. Everything Dean just covered is from a broker to carrier spot perspective. So we're seeing the spot premium ratio for dry van right now. Spot rates are 2.5% lower than contract rates. So that can be a function of spot rates coming down and contract rates going up, or the inverse of that. So let's go on to the next slide here. We're moving on to the new rate differential. New rate differential is the percentage difference between new contract rates and those that they replaced. So we in our data can see rates coming in and those rates they replaced. That metric is sitting at negative 2.5%. The shippers' new contract rates added are 2.5% lower than the rates they replaced. And then finally, the contract rate index is measuring change relative to 2016. So it's our index approach to 2016. You can see some lift there in recent weeks, some July 4th holiday impact there. We'll see how this levels out over the next few weeks. We'll keep an eye on it. Moving on to reefer. So all three metrics there together. Spot premium ratio, as I mentioned just a minute ago, climbing with some pretty good momentum there at negative 4.4. So still well below zero. Once we see that start to tip over zero, that's a signal that the market's turning and we will see contract rates start to rise. New rate differential, still negative 6.5, and with some trend and momentum coming down. So it's an interesting mix between spot rates going up and we're seeing the new rate differential coming down. Contract rate index still pretty flat. You can see the little tick up there, a little bit of flux there with the July 4th holiday, but it seems to have flattened out. And then finally, flatbed, you see a lot that variability that we expect to see with flatbed rates there in the spot premium ratio at negative 9%, and the new rate differential at negative 5.4%, pretty flat there, not a lot of trend up or down. And then contract rate index, slight tick down. We'll keep an eye on that as well. That's a wrap on the shipper side.
It'll be interesting, I think, to watch what happens in the next couple of weeks because contract shippers will be looking to move some of that inventory ahead of Labor Day and some of the sales that start to come up in September. So we could see some of that sustained upward inflection on spot rates in the dry van market heading out in the next 35 to 40 days.
Yep.
All right, let's bring Erica back in. Erica, let's start off with a pretty easy, broad question. You can sort of take it where you like from there. But what's the latest news in fighting fraud in trucking?
Yeah, the biggest thing has really been around identity theft. I mean, naturally, of course, we're still seeing the same upticks just across the industry between phishing and compromised accounts. The new thing, which is really called Vishing, V as in like Victor, that's really another area that's starting to hit people, which is you're getting, basically attacked through your text messaging. Those are kind of the big things that's pop. And then recently, if you are, an avid, cyber buff, like I like to kind of say, I constantly am doing research and I'm constantly looking for new things. And it's interesting. Colorado State University recently published that ELDs, which naturally, of course, are in trucks, are starting to be a way to be a new attack vector. And so I've been following the research, what this, this school is doing, just to kind of see what's that going to change when you think about it from an ELD perspective. Separately, there's also the data privacy. People, I mean, I hate to say it, they don't want, the ELDs in their, in their trailers or in their trucks in general. And so I think you're going to see this shift with data privacy and privacy in general in our entire trucking field. That is going to change the way I think we operate. And so those are kind of the big areas for me that I think we have to think about truly from a fraud perspective. It's you have to constantly be thinking like a hacker. How could I get your truck? How could I get your trailer?
So Erica, when I worked at Qualcomm, one of the big problems we had in South America was the bad guys pulling up alongside the truck and literally disabling it through the ECM and the electronics. Is the ELD device that's tethered to the ECM providing a node to go in and completely disable the truck? Is that what they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing around the paper is really like saying, hey, this ELD device that is now in there, like it's a way that, you could target it by introducing malware. And so that's the thing. And so malware is that software, that bad software, malicious, whichever. And so that's what they're finding is we're actually introducing another electronic device, which everyone knows if you introduce more electronics, you're introducing just another attack landscape and another attack vector. And so that's what they're saying is, the ELDs, by having this, electronic device, like that's the key word, it's electronic. You are providing another way for a hacker, if they want to get in and take control of something. And so whether they want to steal the data or whether they want to just disrupt the actual entire fleet, I mean, if you're a big broker, how many, fleets do you have? I mean, it's massive. And so if you can get in there and disrupt the fleet, imagine what that's going to do from you from a shipping, a delivery, a carrier, like all those areas. Like if you can actually go in and do that, like it's kind of like a ransomware attack. It's just a different version of a ransomware attack in the trucking vertical.
Gosh, if only they could reduce the number of hours worked and give me more available hours by feeling
right.
That'd be a great ad if they could figure that one out. But,
yeah, I think that's the piece too. Is I think you're going to see whether it's the trucking vertical or even just the broader supply chain, there needs to be significant investment in your cybersecurity as a whole. I mean, that's the biggest thing, through all the years that I've been doing some type of cyber element. I mean, that's the piece that's missing. You need to have somebody dedicated to your actual security. You can no longer be, a successful, and granted, again, my opinion, but based on research, you can no longer be a successful, brokerage, company essentially that doesn't have cybersecurity as part of your technology. Like you can't just get away with just having a tech leader anymore. You need to have somebody who's looking at your cybersecurity as well, just because, the types of a fraud, whether it's, like I said, identity theft, whether it's, just a fraudster who's coming after, your load from a physical security standpoint, you need to think about, what are those other elements that they're looking for and what are they actually wanting to do? I mean, deep attacks are becoming a thing. Identity theft is only getting, stronger around zero trust and around your attack landscape. And so you've got to be able to say, hey, I have somebody truly dedicated to my cybersecurity footprint as well as I'm thinking about it, especially from at least a broker landscape.
Erica, if I'm a small carrier or broker, so if I've got 5 to 10 trucks or 5 to 10 agents and I'm running a small operation, I think that probably preventing attacks and how you respond to those are key. Are there some top tips that you can give on how to prevent attacks and how to respond to them if you do? And how do you notice that you're getting attacked?
Yeah, the notice of getting attacked is really going to come from having some type of intelligence, some type of threat intelligence. I know that's hard for small carriers or small, entities, that only have, like you said, 5 or 10 trucks. And so I'm a huge proponent of, I tell people to go out, look at the SMB resources that are available to you. They're free. Also, it's going to tell you some tips and tricks that you can actually think about specifically to your business. The big thing I do tell people is you've got to report the suspicious activity. I know it's hard. I know a lot of people don't want to file against their insurance. They're worried about their bond, but like we're not going to get better actually at addressing fraud if you don't also report it, whether you're, reporting it to the, Department of Transportation, the Attorney General's office, Homeland Security, your law enforcement entity, FCMSA. You've got to be able to do that. The flip side of that, of course, naturally is what everyone is tackling as an industry is vetting your carriers. You want to be able to vet that carrier information more than anything. You've got to have some type of documentation around your shipments. You want to have some type of monitoring of your shipments. These are all things that, they sound really easy and simple to do, but it's also just another thing you have to think about, whether you are, a fleet with 5 trucks or whether you are a fleet with, 5,000 trucks. You've still got to be able to do those basic fundamentals. And then you've got to think about, what is the plan if something does happen? You've got to make sure you have a plan in place. And like the biggest thing I think I always, unfortunately try to remind people is, if it's too good to be true, that is your red flag. Like it is true. It is true. Like I find that, I think probably more than anything with the number of customers that I continue to talk to, it's always like, oh my gosh, like we've been hacked. We've had all these bad things. And it's like, you actually haven't been hacked. It's your account has been compromised, and the account that's been compromised is either because of, what I like to say, poor cyber hygiene. It's passwords have been shared, accounts are being shared with more than one person. Things aren't set up correctly when you think about it from a multi-factor authentication, the number of days that things times out. And so like those are kind of some of the key areas where it's like, if you don't address even those basic cyber hygiene things, you're going to continue to be attacked. And that's hard, but it's like, you have people like myself who are willing to come out and spend time with our customers, and like we will train you and help you understand how to secure your devices, how to make sure that we're actually doing the right thing by our customers. I mean, that's the element of cyber as a service that I like to talk about with our customers is, let us show you the ways that we're seeing the attacks coming in at us. Let us show you the ways that, we're receiving the intelligence and how we can actually partner back with our customers to say, here's the things we want you to pay attention to. And zero trust is another big one that a lot of people want to talk about. And it's like, zero trust is amazing to do, but even from a cyber industry, it's hard because we're asking you to continuously authenticate who you are through the end. And so that's the big thing I would say is, what is your own internal chain of custody? If John is signing up for a load here, is John the same John all the way through your chain of custody of the process from, picking up the load to dropping off the load? If not, that's going to come back and it's probably going to bite you at some point. And that's the hard part. That's the hard pill to swallow.
Erica, you follow on social media, a lot of people talk about being hacked, and too good to be true always comes up. I think they're aware of that, but the failure point is a slight change in, say, an email address or a company name. Can you speak about that? If I'm an owner-operator sitting in a truck stop and I'm looking at my phone, how do I physically spot that? What do I do about combating that?
Yeah, the hard part is when you look at any type of the phishing emails, I mean, the biggest piece of advice that I tell anybody, and it doesn't matter honestly what the industry vertical is, whether it's, finance, banking, whether it's, trucking, supply chain, whether it's technology, it's the red flag is in the email. You can see it. You have to slow down. That is the biggest piece of advice. You literally have to slow down and physically look at the email. And there's going to be a character. There's going to be some type of font you're not going to see it, quite frankly, with the naked eye if you're doing 5 other things. So if you slow down and truly look at the email, you're going to see the red flag is somewhere in there of like, well, this looks funny. Or you're going to be like, this doesn't read correctly. Like it could be a grammar thing. And you're just like, oh, that person typed the email too fast. That's the fish. That's the hook they want to do, is they want to be able to say, oh, as soon as you click on the link in the email, or as soon as you have an opportunity to reply, I mean, that's what it's doing, is it's hooking up your credentials, and then it's going to go and exploit it. And that's kind of the harder part, because then once that stuff is exploited, then it gets out into the dark web, and then it's continuously exploited. And I mean, you can go out and Google, data breaches. Somebody's being breached every day. A database is breached, a database is exposed. Your credentials that were in there, Ticketmaster, which some of these other ones, that have been out in the media lately, that's what it is that database has now been exploited. So think about all the credentials that are in there. So that's the hard part, is you've got to slow down and you've got to actually pay attention to the email, or pay attention to, the text message that you're getting. I mean, those things that come through like that of your boss, your CEO, who's saying, hey, I would love for you to go buy 5 gift cards, or, hey, could you stop off and get this? I'll pay you an extra $250. That's too good to be true. Your boss isn't probably going to be the person who's going to text you that. Those are the things you have to pay attention, which I call, those are the early warning signs of what that red flag needs to be.
Erica, who are we up against here? Is it the guy in his mom's basement, or is it, a corporation in some other country with 500 people in an office building?
Yeah, it's, that's probably one of the most powerful questions, Chad, that I would answer to is, it's both. You're going to find the people who are hanging out in the basement who just want to see what they can get to. And that's just more of an incentive that becomes a notoriety for them of like, oh, hey, I was able to hack into this system or this company or this truck or whatever it is. Those are like, we call those script kiddies that are looking for like the cool, I was able to go out on social media and be able to say, now I can brag about I hacked into something. The drawback, though, is there is that flip side. There are third world countries. There are other countries in general that also have paid fraudsters. They literally pay people to come and try to fraud an actual corporation. Those gig style fraudsters, I mean, that's what they get paid to do, is to see what they can gain from an access perspective. Can they get into someone else's account? Can they into your bank account? Can I, do whatever I want to do, basically, essentially from a company perspective? I mean, you have both types of fraudsters. I mean, there's 8 different types of fraudsters in general, but it's like those are the 2 main ones that you really do have to worry about. And it's hard. I mean, imagine being, like you said, a mom and pop shop who has 5 trucks. You literally now have to think like a bad actor. It's like, how do I learn more about it? How do I get more understanding? That's why, like I say, the SMBs of that, particular state has great free cyber resources. You can pay somebody like me, who's part of like DAT. I'm always willing to come give training to an organization or any one of our customers. I mean, that's just good cybersecurity in general. And when you can go out and actually help people educate, understand the types of fraudsters that are out there, then we can also help you figure out what that attack vector needs to look like and provide those better resources to say, hey, here's where you could secure things better, or hey, you could turn on multi-factor authentication, or hey, don't click the box in multi-factor authentication where it asks you, it gives you that prompt where it says, please don't ask me again 30 days from now. That's the worst thing you could click. You want to be prompted all the time because you're controlling your identity. As soon as you click that box, I mean, you're inviting basically to someone to come and attack you.
That's good advice. I hadn't heard that. Okay.
Yeah, it's great advice. Erica, every week when we follow social media, someone's always saying, our network has been compromised some way or the other. Can you talk about some of the terminology and how carriers and brokers should think about, cybersecurity as opposed to always going to the default, which is our network has been compromised?
Yeah, the big thing really is you've got to understand, which is easier said than done. You've got to understand the terminology. A true hack is basically somebody has actually breached your network, which is, a different type of terminology. I do a ton of education around using the right verbiage, using the right, terminology, because when you come to somebody like me who's a cybersecurity expert and says, hey, your account has been hacked, I mean, that's a very different mindset I go into. I go in through data privacy. I go in through breach notification protocols. I go into, what are the reporting requirements? I go into like this entire, like security incident response plan through my mind of detect, notify, isolate, contain, evaluate, plan. I have to go through all these steps when it's like, when you call in or if you report in to somebody and say, hey, my account has been hacked, it's more of your account's been compromised. And it's been compromised because somebody is posting loads under your name, or somebody's posting loads under your company name. That's what's actually been compromised, is the actual account. And so that's part of like the terminology that we want to try to help with our customers in general is, hey, when you call in and say you've had an account be compromised, that's the best word to use, because one, faster response. Naturally, of course, there's not, an Erica and an entire team that's trying to do 40 other steps. We can very quickly get on the call with the customer and we can go through and, make sure we're working with our compliance team to turn down those accounts that are being compromised, get those loads addressed fast. It's just a different type of response mechanism. And so that I think is just part of our attack surface landscape that you have to think about with customers, is help educate our customers or even just the broader community on what does it mean to have your account compromised? What does it mean to, have your identity stolen? What does it mean to actually report that your account has been compromised, or it's been, some type of, like the customer says now, some type of hack. And it's like, it's not, it's just your account's been violated. I mean, and that's like a painful word to say too, but it's really what it is your account has actually been compromised. And so now let's go through and make sure we have the right security and controls in place to make sure it doesn't happen again going forward, making sure, you have single sign-on, make sure you have SAML. Like these are some of those basic functionalities that you do want to make sure you have, on your side of the house as well as on our side of the house to actually ensure you have the right security.
You mentioned earlier, I think it was Vishing. You mentioned
Vishing.
Talk a bit more about that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So with Vishing, you think about it, is you have somebody who's essentially sending you some type of text, or smishing is another terminology that also goes with the texting. And that's what it is we want to send you some type of code through your phone or some type of like text message where it's got a link, and we want you to intentionally click it. And so once you do, the Vish or the Smish is essentially coming at you and saying, hey, I've got you either via the voice or I've got you either via the text message, and I'm able actually to scam you out of, whether it's credentials, whether it's, bank account information. It's just different ways that fraudsters, again, those fraudsters that are looking to see if they can gather some type of, exposure from you by being vulnerable and then being able to exploit it on their end. So whether you think about it from like, hey, the vishing has always been with the voice part of it, the smishing has been with the SMS text part of it. But I've always said it's one and the same because it's coming at you through some type of device that you're holding on to. And so if I can get you through a phone, or if I can get you through a text message, and if I can exploit you and you want to share your credentials with me, I mean, that social engineering attack is literally going to cause havoc for you.
So talk about it's too good to be true analogy, because what happens next once you click on that link? Walk us through what physically happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on what's in that link. So whatever has been written in that code or in that link, what the script is, it could either, run through your network. If you're answering a phone call and you give somebody's credentials over the phone, they have a script that's running through on the back end that literally can crawl your network. And essentially, that's what kind of how sometimes a ransomware attack could happen is it takes control of your entire environment and it says, hey, we're now going to hold this ransom. Or it could be something simple as, the script of whatever it is that you're clicking on could essentially say, hey, I've now gained access to that person's computer. Maybe I just want to go in and see what files are there. Is there data that is considered PII that is sensitive or classified, and I can actually do something with that data? That's a lot of what it is. Or if it's, financial information, I mean, of course, any hacker is going to try to get into your bank account. And if they can say, hey, you can click on this link and I'm actually going to tell you to go set up a new account, that's how it's actually attacking, folks in some type of like financial industry, is by saying, hey, you need to get a new account. This one's been compromised. And then people click on that link, realizing now they've just gained access to their bank account. And that's what that person's doing, is they're draining your old account. And then they're taking that money and running with it. And then when you call like your Bank of Americas or your Capital Ones or your Chases, that's what you're doing, is you're finding out, oh my God, I basically have just been smished. And that's what you did, is you gave away your compromised credentials. So it's really going to depend on what's in that link, what's that script that's written in that link, and then what it's going to actually do for you on the end. I've seen it, where you click on the link in a work phone and it's actually taken down an entire network. And so that's one challenge. Or I've seen it empty a bank account, and it's hard. It's the crap part of the job, is having to tell somebody like you've now been compromised, and what does that do to you?
I just watched the Beekeeper on plane flight home from Europe last night. And, Jason Statham, of course, went after the bad guys in a big building who drained someone's bank account of $400,000. Very similar story. Yeah.
Very similar story, and a very common story that still happens daily. I mean, that's scary in itself, is, you always read about people who are having their accounts stolen or compromised, or I've lost, $400 versus imagine losing 400,000 or imagine losing 400 million. I mean, I read an article this morning about a very sophisticated tech person transferred $400,000 to buy a home, and it just went through a bad link. She got hooked itself. So it's very common.
Yeah. I don't know, like $1 for every time I've yelled at my boys from the other side of the house, don't click on that link. You can hear the conversation going in the background. You think, hold on, that will not end well. Don't click on that link. That would be good advice for everyone, right?
It is. Here's the challenge though with that. And I always, this is like a little bit of a soapbox that I get on, is, we tell people not to click on links. It's not good. But if you think about it, what do we still send you? We send you a link to authenticate who you are. And so I'm a huge proponent, as from like a cybersecurity industry, we haven't done well as an industry because we still have people clicking on links here in 2024. So like, we tell you not to click on a link, but let me send you an email of how to authenticate yourself and how to, click on all these links to make sure you are who you are. But it's like, we've got to be better and figure out how we're going to solve that especially from a zero trust perspective. If we really want to get to where we're preventing identity attacks or preventing other types of attacks, it's probably not good that we send you a link to say who you are, to click on that link and then say, okay, don't click on links. It's like, wait, isn't that defeating the purpose? That's always my favorite. It's like, don't click on a link, but let me send you this link so you can authenticate who you are. And it's like, wait, we missed something there.
I think that too good to be true is probably a good way to think about it.
It is. That is the best advice I always tell people. It's too good to be true. Spend time training. And that's probably the hardest part more than anything, is you've got to spend time. It's continuous training you have to do with your people, your personnel all the time, your family, your loved ones. I mean, that is the biggest thing. I get excitement when, like my wife, for example, could come down and be like, look, this is a bad email, isn't it? But she can find it. And so like, that's a win. But imagine what that is for people who don't really pay attention to their email.
Right. Yeah.
So
Erica, what do you see as you look out over the next 12 months? What do you anticipate changing?
Oh my gosh. I think the biggest thing that's going to change over the next 12 months is you are going to see a bigger shift in cybersecurity in our supply chain. It's not even just around fraud, I think you're going to start to see that people need to invest in hiring some type of head of security or a CISO. I think you're going to see organizations realize their attack landscape is very different. They're going to have to go deeper in their supply chain. And one area I always tell people is, you look at your third party vendors and it's like, oh, I outsource to this vendor, but who does that vendor outsource to? We're great at looking at that tier one, but you need to go deeper now. You need to look at tier two, tier three, tier four. And companies don't do that. I mean, there are some great large global companies who go deep into their supply chain, but do you probably look at it more from a physical perspective versus from a cyber attack landscape perspective? And so I think you're going to see that shift. I think you're going to see, unfortunately, I think you're going to see fraud get more rampant more than anything because the attackers are more sophisticated. And I think we're going to have to be better at coming together really as an industry to say, how do we continue to combat and tackle fraud? I think you're also going to see people do need to invest in threat intelligence more than anything. It's something that I brought to DAT. I know it's new for us, but I also, through the customers and conversations I've had, nobody else is looking at threat intelligence. And that's your keys to your kingdom. That's telling you what's going on in the industry. That's telling you what's going on in the market. That's telling you what's going on in the industry vertical. And, I'm excited. I can take down, phishing domains now, in real time. And that's huge, but you've got to be able to also figure out how do we share that back with our customers. And that's the piece that I'm really pushing on. And so I think that's the big thing you're going to see shift over the next 12 months is you are going to see people reaching out saying, I need to go hire an Erica. And if you're not thinking about it today, I'm telling you, you are going to be in a world of hurt if you don't get yourself an Erica, or if you don't get yourself some cyber leader to come in and help you with your CIO or your CTO. You need to have that trusted cyber arm at the same time who does think very differently than, cool, I've moved my stuff to the cloud. It's like, great, but how secure is your cloud? So you're going to see that shift.
Before we wrap up, you mentioned some resources for small businesses, some SMB links. Is that something we can drop in the show notes for those folks?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
I will
great.
definitely send that over to you and you guys can share them out with folks. It's good to have.
All right, Eric, thanks for being on. We'll come back to you in a second here as we wrap up the show. Don't forget, coming up, Chris Kaplis, our Professor Chris Kaplis, talking to Alex Leslie on the latest Freight Bond podcast this week. Alex comes from ATRI. They're talking about the cost of trucking in the recent report that was out. Don't forget, DATCon is coming up on October the 22nd in Kansas City. You can register at dat.com/DATCon. Use update 100. I'll be on with Jimmy Mack on Radio Nemo on Sirius XM channel 146 this Thursday at 8 a.m. Next week's show, we've got Noah Damron from Open Tug talking about the barge industry and how they've solved the visibility problem using telematics. Erica, before we wrap up the show, how can people get in contact with you?
Yeah, I always tell people the best thing to do is, one, you can reach out to me through DAT. So I'm always happy to share more with people. You can contact your customer support. My credentials are always shared, meaning like my email address. I don't have any issues there. Yep. I'm out on LinkedIn. And then also you can see me at a variety of different industry events where I talk about, supply chain. I talk about security, all those good areas. And so that's the best way to do it is just reach out, get connected, and let's have a conversation. That's the thing at the end of the day is, cybersecurity is about sharing is caring. And that's what we need to do.
Well, thank you. We're glad we've got you on board. All right. Make sure you sign up for the show, subscribe to DAT Freight and Analytics, set up the alert so you can get notified that the show is about to go live. And with that, another show's in the book. Be safe, be nice to everybody, and more importantly, and we'll see you again here next week at 10 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. Bye, everyone.